Hey, Jim.
Hi, Steve.
Do you remember the old adage, you can't judge a book by its cover?
Yeah, that's sound advice.
Well, what about an album? Judging an album by its cover?
Okay, now that's a whole different story. Unless the album is None More Black. Welcome once again to Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast where each week we two guys, Steve and Jim, get together and what do?
We're going to talk about records.
There we go, man. Lots to talk about this week as well. The subject at hand this week we've kind of agreed upon is talking about some of our favorite album covers.
Yes.
And different reasons for liking them, maybe?
There is a lot of different reasons. And to me, the popularity of records is the album cover. I mean, it's just that piece of art.
Think of it as the doorway in. You know, you see that first, in some cases, before you hear the music. It's the thing that draws you in.
You can see this is going to be a very philosophical discussion already.
It is.
Wow, we're getting deep.
And I need to add also that this is probably one of the most difficult subjects that we've had in this 40-some episodes where I've had to narrow down. This was a tough one for me.
Well, for me, as I'm going through, several thousand albums, looking, which album cover do I really like? There's a few I knew, and then I'm trying to think, well, what about this? What about that? Yeah.
I made a huge list, but we'll try to narrow it down and see where we get with this subject at hand. But because this is a vinyl community podcast, as folks in the VC tend to like to do, we talk about recent pickups and lots of goodies. So did you have a good week this week?
I did, as usual, probably too much. Last week when I was in the store, I was going through the bins here, and you had that new album from The Struts, Pretty Vicious.
Yep.
Didn't know anything about The Struts, but someone else you said had ordered one, so you just bought one. So here we call Blind Buy. Well, okay, this looks cool, the album cover. And I bought it, and it's the fourth album from this group, and it was incredibly good. It was like 70s rock.
Cool.
From, Queen influences to Rolling Stones. It was just power rock in there.
That's cool. I did listen to a couple sound clips, and, when you were thinking about it. I'll agree, man. That's some good stuff.
It was. I was totally blown away by it. And then Amazon had VCLT, which we call Vinyl Community Love Train. They gave me a free album.
From Amazon.
Yeah, from Amazon. Well, I tried to get rid of it, saying this isn't mine. They kept saying, well, you need to send in the paperwork to show it's not yours. This is, well, that's the problem. It's not mine. I don't have anything. And we went around. I couldn't get anywhere, so forget it. Okay, but it was Depeche Mode, Memento Mori.
Okay.
And that came out this year.
Yeah.
And I'm not a huge Depeche Mode fan, but this was so good. It dealt about death because Fletcher, their keyboardist, had died when they started doing this. So there's only two original members left. And it was their exploration into the fact that we are mortal and we are getting closer to death, but yet it wasn't this somber, dark album. It was a lot of poppy in there, some upbeat feeling tunes. It was very good. I was shocked. I never would have bought it, and I'm so glad that Amazon wouldn't take it back and let me have it. So,
I was going to say, did they charge you for it?
No, they never charged it. I mean, I kept trying to give it back. Let me just send it back to you. I don't need this. Well, they knew I did need it, so that was very good.
That's scary because they know.
Yes, they know. They know. And then there were, I had come in and ordered these through for this band's website, Luna, which is a favorite group of mine. They had two live albums they did where they played the whole album in concert in 2017. It was Penthouse and Bewitched. And it's been pushed back, and they finally came in. And both these albums were done in the early 90s. It was wonderful. I'm not a big live album person, and we can talk about that probably some other episode. Well, obviously, it's going to be another episode. but I totally enjoyed them. It was
good.
just these, because those are my two favorite albums from them. So I knew every song. It was great.
And done well live.
Yes, done very well live.
That's important
yes.
with the live
You know,
ones.
their voice, is it the same? No, but it still sounded great.
Cool.
What about you?
Well, after several weeks of saying I've not had a busy week,
Yeah.
I had a busy week this week pulling them in. First up, you may recall a few weeks back we talked about watching rock stars and musicians get older, and hoping that they make it. We're precipitated by the fact that we were set to see Buddy Guy,
Yeah.
and he canceled right before. Well, I picked up a 2018 album from Buddy Guy called "The Blues Is Alive and Well." So hopefully he still is at recording of this, and he's still well enough to go back on tour. But it's a great blues album, and Buddy Guy's been around, well, obviously forever and a day. And you and I have talked about Michigan artist Larry McCray. Well, Larry McCray, his influence has got to be, one of his influences has got to be Buddy Guy.
Yeah.
I recognize so much of McCray's newer work in this older stuff from Buddy Guy, but it's not old, but it's more modern stuff from Buddy Guy from 18. Great album, just a great guitar blues double album.
I had an autographed copy of that he signed when I was at his blues club. That was before the flood.
Oh.
So, well, but it was just fun to see him.
Well, that's cool. It's a great album,
Yeah,
so
it is.
I'm enjoying that. Don't make fun of me on this next one, please.
Well, I don't know. I've been kind of questioning a couple of yours lately.
This was a pickup. I ordered a couple copies for the store and opened one for quality control purposes. It's called, well, it's by the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, so
Okay.
it's going to be orchestrated. But the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra plays prog rock classics. And I was very curious about this, and I gave it a listen. And most of these songs on here are orchestral to begin with. A lot of these older prog rock songs. So it's not a big stretch to give it to a full orchestra like the Royal Philharmonic and say, go with it. There's a couple that aren't, and they're iffy, but they do a nice job, with the strings and the brass leading into it. But there's stuff on here from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, The Suite, and from Tarkus, which, again, that's orchestral to begin with. Then it goes kind of odd with Comfortably Numb. So, from Floyd, Thick as a Brick from Tull, of course, you're going to have that with some woodwinds. There's a song from Focus on here. And then there's King Crimson's 21st Century Schizoid Man, which is actually pretty cool. Moody Blues, Nights in White Satin. Again, not a stretch because that original has a lot of strings in there as well. And then really kind of a cool one, an orchestrated version of Roundabout by Yes. And there's some name folks on here. So it's a little goofy. It sounds like elevator music in some spots, but it's a fun pickup, just a different version of some classic prog that is kind of cool. Then I picked up, I've been on kind of a Leo Kottke kick of late, after the Christmas stuff we talked about. I picked up a 2020 album by Leo Kottke and someone named Mike Gordon. Does that name ring a bell at all?
No.
It didn't ring a bell with me at first because I'm not a huge Fish fan, but he is the bassist from the band Fish, P-H-I-S-H, Fish. And normally I like Leo Kottke's stuff. This is okay. The Leo Kottke part of the album is good. His vocals take a lot of getting used to. That's why he's more of a virtuoso on guitar, and hearing his 12-string stuff is beautiful. When he sings, it's very low, baritone-y, and gravelly in spots, but it's okay. It's not great. But the Mike Gordon influence in this album, turning it into very Fish-like, reminded me why I'm not a huge Fish fan. It's just, there's a song in here called Peel, and all I could think of was the Fish song. There's the wheels on they make contact with the road. It's a very pedestrian song from Fish. I'm sorry, Fish fans. I said it. I'm not going to take it back. And then finally, not finally, there's a big one coming, but I've got one that has now given me a new Grail search. I picked up a reissue of John Fahey, speaking of Leo Kottke, John Fahey and the album Blind Joe Death. This was originally released, I believe, in 1959, self-released, about 100 copies. 1959, and it's folk blues with a 12-string guitar. John Fahey started the label Tacoma Records and brought in the late 50s, early 60s, brought in Leo Kottke that early with that 12-string guitar style. So this is the original version of this, fewer than 100 pressed, and it's a beefcake on Discogs. It's way up there. The original has never sold, though, and it's way upside down. Tons of people want it. I doubt I will ever find it.
Yeah.
But this is just a very good stripped-back folk blues album, instrumental all the way through, and it's some great stuff. Enjoying that. Now, the big one, and I'm sorry, I'm taking up too much time talking about the pickups, but it's been a while. You know, I've been waiting for the soundtrack to The World's End, the third of the Edgar Wright trilogy, the Cornetto trilogy, that goes with Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. World's End was the third picture. This is the third Mondo release in that series. They took forever to get to it, but it's a great record. It looks beautiful. The cover is neat. It's on Cornetto colored vinyl, and it's already knocking out of the park with Discogs. So very happy for that. That completes that section. And cover art wise, this really fits that trilogy as well. If you see them, we'll try to put a link up or at least a picture up on some of the pages talking about these. But that's a great addition to that trilogy of soundtrack albums.
Most Mondo albums could hit most people's top cover art. They are so good at that.
They are. They reimagine the covers, but in this case, never been released on vinyl, so the artist had really carte blanche to go with that. One other note, too, this worked out well for us last week. I put up a Spotify playlist of some of the music that we talked about, so folks, since we can't include them for copyright reasons in the podcast, can go and listen to the music that we're talking about. So we'll do that again following this and post the Spotify link up on our Facebook page. Just search for Two Guys Talking About Records, and you can hear that and hear the music.
There we go.
I do have a couple of news items that I'd like to touch on before we delve into today's topic, if that's okay. Last October, we talked a little bit about the Rocktober releases. A really kind of a sleeper surprise. There were a lot of good titles coming from Rhino and Warner for their Rocktober event. People went nuts on them, and they were really limited, and they did really well. Well, the backside of this is that Rhino does their Rocktober, but they also do a January event called Start Your Ear Off Right. You get it there?
Yeah.
So they just this past week released the titles coming out for their January event from Rhino, and there's some decent stuff on here. Then there's a couple of head scratchers on here as well. Recently, Rhino has introduced these Now Playing series. There was a Gordon Lightfoot and a Rat. These are very, very low price point, entry-level greatest hits albums. It's new compilations, if you will. So there's a couple of these Now Playing, and they come in at the $20 range.
Oh, my.
$19.98 is the suggested. But they're announcing a Zapp and Roger Now Playing on Ruby Red vinyl. Are you familiar with that band at all?
Not a clue.
I believe they're going to be disco-esque funk.
Zapp. Yeah, the Zapp band.
Yeah, Zapp and Roger. There we go. There's a Now Playing also scheduled for Eddie Rabbit. Okay, it's dollar bin fodder normally, but again, it's not going to be high priced, coming in at about $20. I see a Melanie Martinez, an EP from her, newer artist. The English Beat, I Just Can't Stop It, on Magenta vinyl. Here's one that you may be interested in. A remastered version of the Velvet Underground's Live at Max's Kansas City, an expanded version. Looks like this is going to be a double LP on Orchid and Magenta vinyl. There was two more Now Playings. I'm sorry. There's an America and a Foghat. So new greatest hits compilations from each of those. The Doors are on here with the Live She Cried, a 40th anniversary version on translucent emerald vinyl. Yes, their first album, Yes, on cobalt vinyl. A pair from the Grateful Dead, two opposite ends, Terrapin Station on green vinyl and In the Dark on silver vinyl. So those are cool. Those coming in not bad, like a $24.98 list price on them. Black Sabbath, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, a 50th anniversary on smoky vinyl. Curtis Mayfield, there's one more Now Playing from him scheduled, as well as Ray Charles, so new greatest hits from those two. Stevie Nicks, we get Trouble in Shangri-La, and Street Angel, two of her lesser-known albums coming out. Okay, here, you sitting down for this one? There are two releases from Nuggets, the original artifacts from the first psychedelic era, Volume 1 and Volume 2. So the box set from Record Store Day, a couple of, this past April, wasn't it?
It was.
So they're releasing those as two separate standalone double LPs each.
Well, for those that missed it, and it's an affordable option now where you can decide which half of the box set you really want.
Yeah, they're $40 a piece, so you're still coming in a little lower than the $100 box set from April. Okay, and then the one head scratcher for me for the Rhino Start Your Ear Off Right 24 releases is the original motion picture soundtrack from The Three Amigos.
Oh, really? There was a soundtrack on that, huh?
Soundtrack.
Okay.
It was when they're singing in the desert with all the animals.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's going to be on there.
Huh.
But that's a head scratch. I mean, amidst the Grateful Dead and Psychedelic Nuggets and Black Sabbath. Oh, and here's the Three Amigos soundtrack. So those will be released throughout the month of January. You know what? I'm looking at these again. It looks like it's a little more spread out than October. They front-loaded October for some reason. But these look like they're coming out on the 5th, then the 12th, and then the 19th and 26th. So they're split up a little more evenly this time. And I think that's a little more manageable to do. But so if you're a fan of the Rhino stuff, man, talk to your record store soon. Get your pre-orders in because these things do tend to go pretty quickly.
Yeah, I've tried to get that Talking Heads, that live album that came out. Nobody has it. It's gone.
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I've even got a couple on back order, too, trying to get a hold of. So.
Yeah.
Cool stuff from Rhino. One other news item, and this leads directly into our talk about covers that was announced this week. And it's actually been rumored for quite some time. But director Rob Reiner let slip on a podcast that he, in February, will begin filming the long-awaited sequel to Spinal Tap. So This Is Spinal Tap. And this one's going to feature a ton of cameos. I don't know where to go with this. I loved Spinal Tap as a movie simply because it was new and fresh and innovative. The mockumentary had been done before. You think of the Ruddles, the Meet the Ruddles from Monty Python-esque. I know it wasn't Monty Python proper, but they had their hands in it. So the mockumentary wasn't anything new, but for some reason Rob Reiner hit it just right in 84, I think is one, because it's coming up on the anniversary of the album, I believe.
Sure.
So I'm a little apprehensive.
They'll probably look at, this group that's long since disbanded. We need to get the band back together again.
Oh, no, that's exactly what it is.
Yep, okay.
I read the synopsis is basically the daughter of their recently deceased manager is suing the band because they had said they would get back together for one more performance for him. And he died before he could, so she's suing them to bring them all back together for one more live performance. But this one is rumored to have all sorts of cameos, including Paul McCartney and Elton John, because you're supposed to have Paul McCartney and Elton John in just about anything musically. But it should be fun. But again, I can't help but remain skeptical because so many filmmakers, and Rob Reiner as a filmmaker is a great guy, but over the past dozen years or so, he's just been kind of a broken individual. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I think a lot of times when they try to remake older films, not remake, but build upon a sequel to an older film, they end up just kind of, for lack of a better term, desecrating the memory of that original one. And I'm hoping, I really do hope that he does well with this, but I'm not going to get my hopes up too far.
Totally rehash it. I mean, the exact same. Look at Home Alone 2. We just did exactly the same stuff, just a different setting. I mean,
So, but one of the most memorable scenes in Spinal Tap was when they're on the road and their manager says, "Here's your album," because they were touring in support of an album that had yet to be released. Turns out it had been delayed because the record label and the big retailers had a problem with Spinal Tap's album cover, Smell the Glove, featuring a half-naked woman on a leash being forced a glove into her face. And so instead, without the band's knowledge, they released an album that was just all black. Hence the joke, "There's none more black." If you watch the film, you're familiar with that quote. They're looking at it, it's like, "There's none more black, it's death." And the manager said, "Oh, you know what? What was the white album? It was all white." Well, that was the Beatles. This is Spinal Tap. Literally, this is Spinal Tap. So the joke was that they were failing because their album just didn't come out right and they all black cover. But now that is iconic, and it's a really cool addition to my collection because I've got the soundtrack that's all black on the cover. It's very cool.
Okay.
But what does a cover do for an album? It's you mentioned earlier that it is really kind of the doorway into that experience of owning the album. Is that how you see it?
It is. When you walk into a record store, good record stores, they have albums along the wall. It's to catch your attention. There's a reason for that. It's to draw you in. If everything's just in the bins, you can, you go through, but it's what grabs your eye. And I am the biggest sucker for that. Every record store I walk into, the first thing I do is I totally walk the walls. Now, I know it's generally the expensive stuff on there, but it's the artwork, and you're looking at that, and suddenly something says, wow, look at this. Don't know what it is. I have to try it.
This is, as I mentioned earlier, really kind of a tough subject. When we said, let's talk about album covers, I went through and I made a list. It fills up one whole notebook page of scribbles on my behalf, trying to narrow it down to just at least 10 that I could say these are my absolute favorite. But I think we discussed, too, there's different ways to look at this. I have my absolute favorite. You have what you called a blind buy.
Yeah.
Ones, like you said, you see it, you want to dive into it because of the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also, I've got favorites, the more gimmicky covers.
Yeah.
So we can touch upon a little bit of these today, and let's hold our favorites to the very end. How's that sound?
All right.
So what do you want to start off with? The blind buy stuff, and why does that bring you in?
Yeah, we'll just start with the blind buy stuff. And, what I buy a lot of music from Japan. It'll be from Europe. It'll be from South America, Mexico. Most of it's garage rock or psych. And I'm looking at a site, and you just see this artwork that's just really incredible. I just jump at it. I mean, here's one. It was Baby Wood Rose, which they're out of, I think, Denmark. Yeah, Denmark. It's called Third Eye Surgery, but all of their albums, it is so trippy, so psychedelic. It's like eyes all over the place, but it's these bright colors, and it just grabs you. I had to jump at it.
I should interrupt you very quickly here to mention that, yes, we know that this is an audio podcast,
Yes.
so we're not doing justice to these album covers, but on our Facebook page, we will post up several of these covers that we're talking about, so you can see what we're talking about, just not as we're talking about them, unfortunately. Sorry about that, but that's the rules for some audio podcasting.
Yeah.
But that's a very psychedelic and trippy cover.
Yeah, see, here's one from Mexico. It's called Los Terrificos. Go South via Pal Sur. And it just, when you looked at it, there's this man, and his head's kind of like exploding. There's a guy above him. He's like a god, and he has this liquid. So obviously he's giving this guy this liquid. And there's like a leopard talking, a monkey that has a hat on. There's spaceships. There's aliens. There's even a slug.
I see that.
And it's a concept album, believe it or not. Some guy starts tripping and going through time. And then you look at the back cover, and they look like a bunch of revolutionaries. But it's all cartoon. It's very interesting. But it immediately, it just grabbed my attention. I had no idea. It's in Spanish. It doesn't matter. The music was great. It really, really was fun, and I love this album. But man, what a trippy cover! Isn't that just great?
That's wild.
One more I'll just talk about. It was another one. This is an Italian garage rock band called BYST, BYSTS. And the name of the album was Killer on the Road. And there's just a skeleton riding a motorcycle right at the speed of fright.
Yep.
No idea what I was getting into. I just thought, man, skeleton on a motorcycle? That looks cool.
I love the little pulp insert of text in there. It says leather, boots, and gasoline.
That's right. Yeah, it is. It's very like pulp-like. So,
yeah.
It's stuff that grabs me. But Japanese Psych has some of the greatest album covers ever. And I wind up buying a lot of this, not knowing what I'm getting. Boy, that looks cool. And most of the time, it's good. Not always.
I was going to say, that's one of the dangers of, you said the blind buying. You say this cover is so awesome. That does not necessarily translate into the music being something that you latch onto.
Yeah, I had bought an album from the psychedelic Porn Crumpets.
Yes.
And it looked really psychedelic. It looked really cool. I thought, what a cool name. wow, that thing stunk. It was not what I was expecting. And it was like, well, it's the way it is.
I've had that for a few albums. Notably, there's a Detroit punk act from the 80s called Elvis Hitler, very offensive punk music. That their album covers are that very skull-like and flaming, and yeah, it's punk, and I'm in the mood for it once in a while, but it's just not a go-to for something like that. That or man, there's another Michigan band called Snake Out. Same thing, very trippy album covers, but not something you want to listen to with the kids around.
Sure.
Now,
What did you have?
well, it's actually, and I thought about this. It's tough for me to be a blind buyer nowadays because I'm immersed in this at the store so often. Even with new music coming in, I will see the album covers well ahead of time. I guess it's more clinical for me. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And it makes it more difficult to say I'm going to jump into this because of the album cover. Now, it still happens once in a while for me when I'm going through a collection. Most notably, that psych rock collection that we brought in here a couple of years ago. I was finding stuff in there that I was discovering for the first time. I had no idea what it was. The cover drew me in. I listened to it. It's very, very cool. Things like Art, that the band is named Art, and Supernatural Fairy Tales ended up being one that I kept out of this collection. Pretty valuable too, but it was just a very psychedelic looking cover that normally I would have, well, this is kind of cool. It made me want to throw it on the table and listen. So it's a little bit different because, I'd bought a lot of these ahead of time and I'm just kind of going through them for the store. And it's like one for the store, one for me. Two for the store, two more for me.
Yeah.
I have to be careful about that. But there's been others. I had one of my blind buys made in one of my top 10 here. And this was very early. And we've talked about some of the albums that meant a lot to us when we were younger. And this was the Cramps' Bad Music for Bad People. It was just such a bright yellow cover with that another skull. Listen to me here, getting kind of morbid, but a very horror-looking individual on the cover. And for some reason, I was out of high school and I saw that long before I went to college, not long before, but before I went to college and discovered these other types of music, that album cover drew me in. And I had some friends that, were all into, Van Halen and Black Sabbath and the Def Leppard and AC/DC. And I bring this one in and everybody's like, what the hell is that? I'm like, listen to this stuff. And we threw it on there and that garage rock of Goo Goo Muck kicks in or some new kind of kick kicks in there. And everybody's looking at me like, what are you doing? What are you bringing in here? I thought it was cool. And in this case, that blind buy worked for me. I would not have bought it had it not been for that cover. And it ended up being not only one of my favorite covers of all time, but one of the albums that I like to dive into once in a while. And I know you're a big Cramps fan as well.
Absolutely.
Other ones that brought me in based on the cover, a few years back, I was doing a little antique mall digging. I don't do that very often anymore because, well, antique malls are what they are.
Yes.
But this was before things got too crazy with antique malls. And I found an album by Neil Merriweather. He's a Canadian artist, passed away a couple of years ago, called Space Rangers. It wasn't cheap, but it also wasn't outrageous. It turned out to be a white label promo. And for lack of a better term, it was a very sci-fi looking cover. Just very trippy 70s sci-fi stuff from them. And the music came through on that as well. He had a Donovan cover of Sunshine Superman. But it was almost a concept album about people living in outer space and these space rangers. Again, a very pulp-like looking cover it's tough to explain. So I think I'm just going to show Steve kind of what it looks like. But you've got kind of this 50s Martian movie invasion theme kind of going with this.
Yeah, it very much is 50s sci-fi B-movie.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. So again, that drew me in because of the cover. I ended up really liking the album. It's not one of my go-tos, but I do listen to it once in a while, and it's just a cool cover. Cool enough that I sought out other stuff from Neil Merriweather. He's got one other album that is of this ilk that I ended up buying a couple of reissues of that and a reissue of this. So that cover drew me in enough to seek this artist out and look for more of his stuff.
Did you ever buy the Lime Spiders in the 80s, Into the Cave?
I have not bought that, but I've seen it. I was at the radio station.
That was another one of those. I just bought it and go, wow, that looks cool. And I bring it home and go, oh my God, this is amazing.
Another one that was cool for me at the start was They Might Be Giants. This one narrowly, and I mean narrowly, missed my top 10 favorite covers. They're self-titled. It's really kind of known now as the Pink album. It's one of those that just has so much going on that you have to sit and study it. It's all these little cartoon characters, and they might be giants are a little odd with their covers. Anyway, they're very inventive actually with their covers. But the pink album from TMBG, the one that's got Don't Let's Start on it, the cover was just kind of very cool. It looked like almost one of those little restaurant menus that was colored in by someone, or a map that just had all of these little scenes happening on it.
Okay.
And it's a great cover, and it's a great album, and it's an album that means a lot to me, but I had to kind of push it down a little bit. Just didn't quite make it because of some others.
One thing I've always really enjoyed about album covers, the reason why I was really late to getting into CDs is, I loved albums. I loved the covers of it. But it's some of the artists. For instance, Salvador Dali, he did a Jackie Gleason album cover.
Really?
Yes. It was called Lonesome Echo was the name of the album from Jackie Gleason. It was done by Salvador Dali. Of course, Andy Warhol, his famous one that he did for, Velvet Underground and Nico of the P.O. Bowl. Banana, and he did other album covers also. Sonic Youth had Gerhard Richter, and he's an artist that's still alive, and his stuff goes for astronomical prices. But they did a album called that was the wrong one. This was Daydream was done by Gerhard Richter. Daydream Nation by Sonic Youth with that candle.
Yeah.
And, that was just an iconic cover as far as I'm concerned. And then Patti Smith's Horses. Think of the beauty of that photograph on there. Robert Mapplethorpe took that picture. And it was funny. Patti Smith went into his apartment by accident, met him. He took out a Polaroid camera and snapped that picture.
Some of that stuff happens just so spontaneously that it's amazing that it becomes so iconic.
Yeah. It was Richard Prime. That was the one that did the Sonic Youth Nurse from 2004. His works go for millions of dollars, but if you buy Sonic Youth Nurse, you can have one right there in your own house.
You mentioned Andy Warhol and the Banana Peel cover for the Velvet Underground. Very iconic and very cool, but a gimmicky cover. That's another thing that I think makes a lot of covers work for me, is if they have some sort of gimmick.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little annoying, i.e. the zipper for the Rolling Stones. But a lot of times it's something that makes that album a little bit extra special. So do you have any favorite gimmick covers other than the Velvet?
Well, I did buy that Brian Jonestown Massacre because they had a box of colored pencils on it. Did I really need it? No. But I go, look, it's a white. You can color this in. It gives you a box of colored pencils. So I did buy it. Cramps Off the Bone. They gave you 3D glasses, and you put those on. And I believe a number of groups have done it with 3D glasses.
Grand Funk did as well. If you find that album cover with the glasses still on the inner sleeve, unattached, it's worth a little bit more. Another Detroit punk band, the 3D Invisibles, did the same thing with a cover in 3D. Those old 3D glasses, by the way, something that you don't see much of anymore.
No, you don't. But that was really neat. And Rolling Stone's Some Girl, I always like that cover.
Yep. The die cut stuff on Some Girls, when you get a die cut cover like that, it gives the artist a way to kind of show some things off, not necessarily in there. In the case of the Rolling Stones, it was all the faces until they got sued.
Yeah.
One of the gimmick covers of die cut of that nature, another one that I like, is Physical Graffiti from Led Zeppelin. You've got a few different ways to look at it, depending upon whether you use the inside sleeve that they've got or the actual inner sleeves. There's those photos on an inside but an inside insert that matches up to the window die cuts on Physical Graffiti, as well as the inner sleeves. So you can look at this album cover in multiple different ways like that. Another Led Zeppelin cover that uses that die cut very effectively is Led Zeppelin 3 with the pinwheel. If you've got that working pinwheel, you can kind of spin that and see some nifty stuff in there. I think Soft Machine did one like that too down the line as well. But some other cool gimmicky covers that I really enjoyed were Alice Cooper was always good for them.
Yeah.
A couple of die cut covers where the windows open up and match up with the inner sleeves, or School's Out, where it folds out into a school desk and opens up. But that's also really the downfall for that record cover, is the fact that so many people thought that was cool to see an original that is not been opened up as a school desk or ripped to shreds trying to get the record in and out is a rarity.
Can you imagine the record company when Alice comes in? Here's what I would like my cover to be. And they just go, what? How much?
Well, I actually remember a few years back, I talked to Alice Cooper when he was getting ready to release Detroit Stories. We did an interview for our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And I asked him about those album covers. And he basically just said that they were blessed with the fact that they sold so many records that the label just said, yeah, fine, whatever you want to do. Go ahead. You want to put panties in? Go for it. So, I mean, it was odd, but, he had some artistic folks helping him and his ideas as well to make these things work. Now, there are some newer covers that get to be a little gimmicky. There's one by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. I forget the album, but it's got kind of that die cut with the dinosaur on the cover and a very reflective inner sleeve. Beck's Hyperspace. There's a special version of that that's a holographic edition where the cover is a little bit different, and it's a very it looks holographic, metallic almost on the cover of that one.
I did buy that King Gizzard because of that
That's
record. There's another one. No idea what I'm getting, really. I know the name King Gizzard, but Jim goes, look at this album cover. Oh, okay, I'll buy it.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then there's a few Jethro Tull ones that come out as gimmicky as well. The stand-up that has the pop-up on the inside, as well as, the Thick as a Brick had the newspaper, but that was really more of an inside once you open it up. I take that back. You could see the newspaper, and it was kind of folded on the outside a little bit, too, if I remember right in some of the originals. So that's some very cool stuff to do, and it's all meant to drag us in as lovers of art, of the cover art, as well as the music.
And it works. It works really well.
Okay, so now comes the time, Steve. Are we able to narrow these things down to say, do we have favorites? And we should probably quantify this today. So what makes this our favorite? Is it the artwork alone, or is it the combination of the artwork and the music that really helps elevate the cover to something that we really adore?
Sure. Yeah, you're right. A lot of it for me is just, oh gosh darn, that artwork's really cool. My all-time favorite album cover is from Howlin' Wolf. It's a white album cover, but on it is written, this is Howlin' Wolf's new album. He doesn't like it. He didn't like his electric guitar at first either. That's all that's on this. I think it's the most hilarious album cover I've ever seen.
It's just white with black typeset on it, and it comes from Cadet Concept that did the Muddy Waters as well.
Yes.
The Electric Mud.
Uh-huh.
So it looks a little like that. But that's just great, and that's a statement he's making, too.
Yes. So, but he was not happy about that album whatsoever. Next, I had Miles Davis, Live Evil, actually Bitches Brews, done by the French surrealist Mathieu Clarine. It's French, so I said it wrong, though he's born in Germany. But when you've seen Live Evil especially, the artwork is so trippy on that.
It's another one of those that has so many elements, just giving you so much to look at and absorb.
Now, my next one was the Cramps, the songs the Lord taught us.
Okay.
It was just the four of them there, but they look sinister, especially Gregory Hawkins. He has a skull, a bone jewelry on, necklace. And it just, you look at that and go, these guys look like they're here to do business. Wow. I love looking at that album cover. Cool. Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bullocks. A guy named Jamie Reed did it. And Malcolm McLaren told him, he goes, I want you to make the ugliest album cover possible. I want this thing to be just the worst looking thing. He made it look like a ransom note, but it was the bright colors.
The bright colors, especially that neon pink, just grabs you.
Yes, neon pink, then they did a yellow. And
there's a few different ones,
Yes, there is, and it just grabs your attention, and it did its job. But McLaren's whole thing was, I want an ugly album cover, which is Malcolm McLaren. Dead Kennedys I had down, Plastic Surgery Disasters. This was done by a photojournalist, Michael Wells, and it's a hand holding a hand of a child from Uganda that's going through a famine. And it is powerful.
Yes, it is.
Oh, my God. You look at that. At first, I thought it was an alien hand or something was supposed to be, but it was a little child.
It's a political statement.
It is. Absolute political statement. And it is one of the most powerful album covers.
I have to kick in because one that almost made my list was Frankenchrist by the Dead Kennedys. Mm-hmm. Just that whole Shriner convention mixed with the music was like, wow.
Yes, you're right. I had then Grace Jones's Night Clubbing. It just one wonderful album, but she's dressed in this men's Armani suit,
Yeah.
and it was really, they squared her off. I mean, she almost looks like Block. She has that that crew cut type hairdo, but it was like androgyny. Yep. And she's smoking this cigarette, but it's such a cool, fun. I mean,
minimalist in this case.
It is, and it's very much artwork. Santana, the Lionhead, the very first Santana one. Lee Conklin designed it. He was doing these posters for Bill Graham, and I think he did one for Santana. They go, well, we want our album cover like this. And I always just saw this Lionhead for years.
Until you look closer.
And it's filled with other pictures in there. Yep. I mean, there's all these other people, and it was just the most amazing album cover. I was blown away by it. Johnny Cash's American 4. It had a picture. It was all black except for this black and white. This was his last album right before he died. And it's heartbreaking.
Yep.
I mean, you just see, you could tell the end's there.
That's one that really kind of goes with the music contained within.
Yes, it does. Oh, very, very much so. My ninth, I had Marvin Gaye's I Want You. It's by Ernie Barnes. Sugar Shack, he painted that in 1971. Good Times wound up using that on their TV show.
Huh.
But it's just a fun people dancing in a place called the Sugar Shack, and beautiful cartoon type artwork. And my final one really was the Ramones and actually the Pretenders. They're just standing there looking tough.
Yep.
And it's just iconic photography that you look at there and go, man, look at that. They look so darn cool. Why can't I look cool like that?
It's the leather.
It was the leather. Yes, I believe Chrissy Hine was wearing a leather
indeed.
jacket. Yes. What about yours?
Well, I'm going to work my way backwards, and I'm going to cheat starting off because I had trouble getting the number 10 spot narrowed down.
Yep.
And it was really a tie between two Dead Milkmen album. I've got Metaphysical Graffiti and Beelzebubba. Now, Metaphysical Graffiti is obviously a take on the Led Zeppelin album, Physical Graffiti. And it's really kind of a toy house emulating the cover of Physical Graffiti. Now, sadly, there's no die cut in there, but it's still a very cool one. But I'm going to give the edge to Beelzebubba. It's the guy with the coveralls, the overgrown grass standing next to a broken down lawn tractor that really just kind of made you wonder what this album was about. And it's not about what the cover is because it's the Dead Milkmen. But Beelzebubba comes in there really nice. Now, I already mentioned Neil Merriweather and Space Rangers and that 50s B-movie Pulp cover. That made my list of the top 10. Also, another sci-fi one is Kansas from 1979 and the album Monolith. This is kind of a post-apocalyptic cover showing Native Americans. It's a gatefold, so when you open it up, you see the full picture. But it's Native Americans in full headdress, but they're wearing air helmets, space helmets, in a post-apocalyptic scene next to a crumbling overpass.
Molly Hatchet's first album with a guy on the horse with the axe. I bought that. I didn't know who Molly Hatchet was, but that was just one of those, look at that. That is just the coolest kind of sci-fi fantasy. Bought it, loved it.
Next up is a comedy album of all things. I'm tossing in on this. This is from the Firesign Theater. And the name of the album is How Can You Be in Two Places at Once When You're Not Anywhere at All? What's actually cool about this, though, is it's got the members of the Firesign Theater looking like a tin pot dictators standing on a balcony waving to the populace. And this album is actually better known as All Hail Marx and Lenin because it shows these guys from the Firesign as these dictators and a banner behind them saying All Hail Marx and Lenin, but instead of Marx and Lenin, it's Groucho Marx and John Lennon. So very tongue-in-cheek, but I also like that because the inside's got a big gatefold showing the character Nick Danger.
Okay.
And that was my radio.
Oh.
I'm pointing up there so you can see it behind me.
Yeah, okay,
That was my radio air name for many years was Nick Danger, so I kind of co-opted that, but it's a fun one. Back to the 80s alternative, I go with The Call and Modern Romans. It's and I should have researched where that came from because I think that's an older film clip that they use on there, but it just shows something to kind of emulate the fall of Rome, and it's a very intriguing cover. Next up was REM, and I like this one because it's a little bit of a mystery, and on the radio, when I would play stuff off of this, I'd always say, well, this is Fables of the Reconstruction, or it's Reconstruction of the Fables. And the title of the album really depended upon which way you're holding the cover. If you've ever looked at that, because the cover kind of starts off saying Fables of the Reconstruction in one way, and then if you turn it over, it's Reconstruction of the Fables.
I never noticed that.
And it's just kind of a fun one, but it's a very artistic cover as well, kind of a water paint almost looking cover on there. The Violent Femmes, their self-titled Violent Femmes from 1984, the very iconic cover of the young girl in the white dress kind of leaning in, looking through the window of a dilapidated garage door or something along the lines. Very cool artwork. Then again, the Cramps, I mentioned this, Bad Music for Bad People. That bright yellow with the evil-looking skull with the big hairdo, just kind of grinning at you, knows, like you said with the Cramps, you know they mean business at this point. Very tough to choose between the Floyd albums. You know how I am with Floyd. I ended up feeling that Pink Floyd's Animals was the top cover of theirs. And Storm Thorgerson, I've got to say that right, it's a tough name to get, did a lot of artwork for Floyd.
He did.
And the Animals cover has always just been kind of a very intriguing one with that factory. And it's actually a factory it's outside of London. It's actually a factory that they
it's a power plant?
A power plant of some sorts. And, they obviously photoshopped back then, but they manipulated it to put the pig in there and colorize it. But it's just a very industrial looking cover. And I think it's one of those that, much like the Johnny Cash, does well to emulate the music contained within.
And, I mean, you think so many Pink Floyd album covers are iconic. I mean, and I mean, they just, that's Pink Floyd or Thurgenson, or I'm saying it, however. But he made so many album covers I mean, he was the man.
Yep. He was, and that's what made that tough to kind of narrow down. And I decided I'm not going to say, oh, Floyd this, Floyd that. I'm going to narrow it down to one. I mean, other ones, obviously Wish You Were Here is up in there too. Metal is up in there as well. So
Adam
much
Hart
good.
Mother.
Yeah, Adam Hart Mother. So many good and recognizable ones, but Animals is one of the top ones for me that does it. And you knew where I was going to end up with this, didn't you? Speaking of one guy who does all the artwork for a band, the band Rush and Hugh Syme, very well known for the artist doing a lot of their artwork. And there's so many other Rush covers that I think are so intriguing and so elegant, I guess is a good way to do it. But Permanent Waves from 1980, again, my favorite album of all time. It's going to be my favorite cover of all time. And it's just one that has a lot going on with it as well. You see the idea of a trio. You've got fire, water, and wind, and a woman standing over wreckage, looking very nonchalant. And what's also cool is that this cover had a little controversy with it as well, because there's a newspaper down in the very bottom that says originally Dewey defeats Truman. They used that famous newspaper, and it was released in Canada like that, but as it got around to the U.S. release, the threatened lawsuit appeared, and they had to remove that, and it was just a piece of blank spot on the front. The paper said, you can't use that, that's our copyright. So there was also, in the very far back, again, this is one of those covers that there's a lot of stuff going on. On the far right, you see a building of stores that has some signs that are meant to emulate like a Coca-Cola product thing. And originally that's what they said, but again, the corporation said no, so it basically just says Lee Lifeson and Peart, the names of the artists of Rush from there.
You really have studied that album cover. I got to tell you, I mean, that was like a little Where's Waldo type thing going on.
It's one of those,
there.
I like them when they make you stare at them and you think about what's going on and you see everything that's going on in there. Moving Pictures is another great one if you've ever taken a closer look at that. Side note to all of this, Hugh Syme, the artist for a great deal of Rush's artwork, I met him via a Zoom call earlier this year. The folks I'm tied up with Rush Fest Scotland, they sponsored a Zoom call with a lot of the bands that were partaking in the compilation albums, the tribute albums to Neil Peart, and they had invited Hugh Syme to be a part of that call. So I got to hear him talking about his artwork and his relationship with Rush, and he designed the artwork for this upcoming Neil Peart tribute album that is out digitally and on CD and will be out on vinyl sometime next year. But his artwork was so integral to Rush. It's great seeing the folks at Rush Fest Scotland, utilizing him and him offering his services to create that. He asked me a question too, by the way. He said, "Where's your record store?" And I said, "We're in Midland, Michigan." So that was kind of a neat little thing. But it helps too. You mentioned I've studied some of these, as you have too. When you're younger and you're listening to a record, and we have talked about this so many other times before, about how that experience of listening with headphones on or you're looking at the liner notes and you're staring at the cover. That's the total experience.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really what draws me in. Yes, the cover's that gateway, the doorway, but the total package makes that all worth it.
It is. As we get older, we have so many things to do. We don't do that anymore. I mean, we got life. Yeah. But when you're young, this is what's important. Anything else, forget it. Only listening to this music.
It's so tough to do, and I find myself, even here at the store, once in a while, if it's quiet and we've got no customers, I will do that. And I'll put something on and I'll sit and I'll try to look at the cover and the liner notes. But again, it's tough to do these days.
Yep.
Maybe we all need to take that time to sit down and enjoy an album cover and liner notes.
I'm going to get with my boss about that and ask, I need an extra 2 hours a day for listening time.
So you're saying I should close down for an hour in midday just to do that?
I think so. Some call it siesta. You're going to call it music break.
It's a vinyl therapy is like what we try to call it.
Well, what are some of your favorite album covers? Please let us know. You can head over to our Facebook page. Just search for Two Guys Talking About Records, and you can interact with us that way. Let us know what some of your favorites are. And again, we know that this is kind of a visual thing today, so we will have a lot of these images posted up on there, as well as the music that we were talking about. We'll do a Spotify playlist for that as well. So what do you think?
I think, you know what, it's the best part. Well, no, I love vinyl, but the artwork, it's incredible. And this is why I really collect music. I want this artwork.
You want everything that goes with it.
Yes, and I love being sucked into buying stuff because it just looks cool.
We're suckers all the way around, aren't we?
Yes.
Well, you folks have a great week, and we'll be back again in the next episode as we'll talk about what? What do you want to talk about? More records?
Yeah, why not? We're on a roll.
Thanks, Steve. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too, Jim. Bye.